James grew increasingly uneasy as he watched Storm, their usually gentle German shepherd, take his familiar position beside the crib once again. The evening had descended on their modest home, and, like every night for the past 2 weeks, Storm stood vigilant, his posture rigid and his ears sharply angled forward. A deep, steady growl emanated from him as he focused on the same corner of the nursery. Tink heard. When they brought baby Oliver home from the hospital 3 months ago, Storm had been nothing but protective, lying quietly beside the crib during naps and wagging his tail when Oliver made a sound. But something had changed 2 weeks ago. Now, every night, without fail, Storm would stand guard and growl. The weather had grown warmer, and James had checked the nursery thoroughly each time. The windows were securely latched, the screens intact, and there were no signs of unwelcome visitors like mice or squirrels. Still, Storm's behavior remained the same, always focused on that same corner, even when Oliver was sleeping peacefully. Margaret had suggested taking Storm to the vet to check if he was experiencing discomfort or anxiety, but after the examination, it was revealed that Storm was in perfect health for his age. The vet explained that dogs sometimes sense things that humans can't detect, like subtle sounds or changes in air pressure. James spent hours observing Storm, noting that his growl didn't sound aggressive, but more like a warning, similar to how he acted when hearing unusual noises outside. Storm never showed any aggression toward Oliver, positioning himself as though guarding the baby from something in that corner of the room. "Maybe we should have someone check the house," Margaret suggested one evening after another night of Storm's strange behavior. "Remember last fall when he wouldn't stop scratching at the kitchen wall? It turned out there was a leaking pipe inside." James knew Margaret had a point. Storm's instincts had proven reliable before. The next day, while changing Oliver's diaper, James noticed something. A slight drag near the corner where Storm always focused. It was barely noticeable, but enough to make the baby mobile twirl slightly. Could this be what was bothering Storm? Dogs are known to be sensitive to such things, and with their acute hearing, they can detect sounds far beyond human perception. James decided that tomorrow he would call a home inspector to thoroughly examine the house. Something was clearly wrong, and if Storm was trying to warn them, James was determined to find out what it was. That night, as Storm maintained his vigilant position by the crib, James reached down to pat the dog's head, earning a brief tail wag in return, though the dog's eyes never left the corner. "Good boy," James whispered, grateful for Storm's dedication. Whatever was bothering him, they would get to the bottom of it, for Oliver's safety and Storm's comfort. The mystery would soon be solved. But for tonight, James took comfort knowing that their loyal guardian was watching over their son with unwavering devotion. After all, dogs often sense things long before humans can. The following morning, James called a home inspection service. The soonest appointment was 3 days away, which felt agonizingly long given Storm's persistent behavior. Margaret suggested moving Oliver's crib into their bedroom for the time being, but James hesitated. He was concerned that it might only hide the issue Storm was desperately trying to warn them about. Throughout the day, James observed Storm's behavior, noting a peculiar pattern. In the morning, the dog seemed relaxed in the nursery, napping in the patch of sunlight that streamed through the window. But by late afternoon, Storm's anxiety would grow, and by 4 p.m., he would begin pacing between the nursery door and that mysterious corner. As evening approached, James worked from home, taking detailed notes on Storm's behavior, hoping to identify a trigger something. The draft seemed stronger at certain times, especially when the sun heated the exterior wall. James wondered if the older house had structural issues that were becoming more apparent with temperature changes. Margaret returned home from her teaching job and mentioned that her elderly neighbor had noticed water stains on the wall backing up to Oliver's nursery after the last big storm. That evening, as Tom took his customary position by the crib, James used a stepladder to examine the corner more closely. With a flashlight, he discovered hairline cracks in the ceiling paint spreading from the corner. When he pressed his hand against the wall, he felt a slight vibration, barely noticeable, but definitely there. Oliver slept peacefully through it all, while Storm's eyes tracked the shifting shadows on the wall, his growl deepening when the vibrations seemed to intensify. Margaret spent the evening researching possible explanations. It could be anything: a loose pipe, structural settling, or even something electrical. She murmured. But what worried her most was why Storm only reacted at night. There must be something that shifts as the house cools down after sunset. They decided to take turns staying in the nursery overnight. During James's watch, around midnight, he noticed the draft had grown stronger, accompanied by a faint rushing sound, like wind moving through the wall. Storm's ears twitched at every new sound, and his growl remained protective. James cradled Oliver in his arms and walked around the room, but whenever he neared the corner, Storm positioned himself between them and the wall, staying close but never aggressive. It was clear the dog was trying to protect them from whatever danger he sensed behind the wall. James felt grateful for Storm's unwavering vigilance, knowing that the dog's instincts had alerted them to something important. The home inspector's visit couldn't come soon enough, but until then, James took comfort in knowing that their loyal companion was keeping watch. Dogs often sense things humans can't, and Storm had earned their trust time and time. Finally, the inspector arrived on Thursday morning. His sharp gaze immediately took in Storm's tense posture in the nursery. Dogs are often better than any tool we use, the inspector remarked. They can pick up on things our instruments might miss, like the sound of water running through a pipe or wood straining under pressure. Jim explained Storm's behavior while Margaret held Oliver nearby. The inspector listened carefully, then began his examination, starting with basic measurements and checking the walls for level. When he reached the corner where Storm had been focused, "This is interesting," the inspector murmured, pulling out a moisture meter and running it along the surface. The reading jumped significantly in the area where Storm had been watching. Throughout the inspection, Storm remained close, his eyes never leaving the corner. When the inspector tapped the wall, the dog's ears pricked forward, and a low whine escaped him, different from his usual growl, more urgent, as if confirming that someone else had finally noticed what he had been trying to warn them about. The inspection revealed troubling findings. Significant water damage from a failing gutter had been allowing moisture to infiltrate the wall, weakening the structure. The vibrations James had felt were likely from water moving through deteriorating materials. The problem had been escalating due to the unusually wet spring. This had gone unnoticed for a few more months. You could have faced significant structural problems, the inspector warned. Your dog probably saved you from a much bigger disaster. James patted Storm, who seemed to relax slightly now that others were acknowledging the threat. The inspector recommended immediate repairs to address both the water damage and the internal issues. By evening, Storm's growls had softened, and his demeanor was calmer, as if he knew help was finally on the way. That night, James and Margaret moved Oliver's crib to their room temporarily, following the inspector's advice. Storm followed them, inspecting the nursery one last time before settling in their bedroom. The contractor arrived the following week and discovered that the water damage was far worse than initially believed. The wooden support beam in the corner had rotted significantly, and portions of the wall cavity were filled with mold. The compromised beam had been shifting under the house's weight, causing the vibrations Storm had been hearing. This beam could have given way without warning, the contractor explained, shaking his head in amazement. These old houses can hide their problems until it is too late. James watched the workers as they carefully documented the damage. If it hadn't been for Storm's persistence in warning them, they might not have caught the issue in time. As repairs progressed, Storm's behavior changed. Instead of growling anxiously at night, he watched the contractors with great interest, following them around as they replaced the damaged materials. The workers grew fond of him, amazed by how attentive he was to their work. The local vet who had first examined Storm explained that dogs can detect subtle vibrations and sounds at frequencies far beyond human hearing. Storm wasn't just sensing the sound of water or creaking wood. He was likely picking up on the overall instability of the structure itself. James and Margaret learned that several other homes in the neighborhood had similar issues, though none had been caught as early as theirs. As the repairs neared completion, Storm's demeanor relaxed. Instead of his usual alert growling, he lay calmly on his bed, watching the workers finish up. The visible relief in his body language confirmed that the danger was passing. Finally, the day arrived to move Oliver's crib back into the restored nursery. The walls had been repainted, new baseboards installed, and extra waterproofing measures put in place. The contractor had replaced the rotted beam with a sturdy new support. Storm entered the room sniffing carefully round the baseboards before flopping down contentedly in his usual spot by the window. There were no growls, no signs of distress, just the calm demeanor of baseboards in place. That night, James and Margaret exchanged a grateful glance. Storm had saved them from a serious problem, and his unwavering loyalty had brought them peace of mind. They were more certain than ever that the bond between a dog and his family could be life-saving.